Are we all set? All right, good morning to everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to our program today and introduce our speaker. She is a Connecticut master wildlife conservationist and a bear enthusiast, and will be sharing facts about bears and help dispel myths and common misunderstandings. She has been studying about bears for almost 35 years and has created an education program called The Bear Reality. You will have time at the end of our program to either wait and chat or also to ask questions. So if you would hold your questions till then, may I present Felicia Ortner.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. And now I got to make sure that I can share my screen. And let's see. Hello. Share. All right.
There you go.
Okay. I think we're good.
Yep.
All right, so I'll get started. And like I said, we'll have the presentation is about an hour, and then we'll have time afterwards for questions if you have any. Okay. Can you guys see me or no?
We can't see you at the moment, but
okay. But you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what's important. Okay. For centuries, humans have been fascinated with bears around the world. They have put bears in our history, in our legends, in our myths. We've also put them in our heavens. One of the most recognized constellations in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, is, or piece of constellation, is the Big Dipper, which you could see on any clear night from this area. It's actually part of the third largest constellation in the sky, which is called Ursa Major, or the Great Bear. We've also had Hollywood make them villains in our movies. And we've also had other types of media that have helped with this image. This is from a display at the North American Bear Center in Minnesota. And as you can see, it's many different covers of popular magazines, including National Geographic, and all of them have these incredibly ferocious looking bears that are, looking like, well, if they're going to get off the page, they're going to probably rip you to shreds. But now if you look at these, every single one of these, including National Geographic, is actually a trained bear. It's a Hollywood bear. Not one of those are real bears. And that's because they all have that growling face. And that's actually not something that bears do naturally. That's something that their trainers have to teach them. And as you see here, these are the same bears that you saw on those magazine covers, and with their trainers. And they're these are very popular bears. You've seen them in commercials, magazine covers, and many movies. Of course, we've also used them as national mascots and educational icons. Smokey's been teaching us how to prevent forest fires since the 1940s. On February 15th in 1903, in a little shop in Brooklyn, the owners of the shop, Morris and Rose Mitchum, decided to put in their window some little stuffed animals that Rose had made, and they were little stuffed bears. And because of a story that had been going around the year before about the United States president and a hunting trip that he went on with the Mississippi governor, a bear hunting trip, they actually petitioned the president and asked him if they could use his name when selling their bears. And the president thought it was a wonderful idea. And that's how we actually got the teddy bear, of course, named after our President Theodore Roosevelt, who himself was a great conservationist and did a lot for that movement. But who are they really? Now, bears are a large mammal. They're found on 4 continents in the world. Currently, there are 8 existing species in the world on those 4 continents. They're an omnivore, meaning that they eat meat and vegetation. They are not the cute, cuddly toy, but they're not the ferocious beast either. Actually, in America, in North America, they're our closest relative in the wild. Their muscle and their bone structure is most like ours of any other species here in North America in the wild. Now, even though we're fascinated with these creatures, the majority of the bear species are vanishing. They're facing a growing number of threats: encroachment and loss of habitat, illegal hunting and poaching, and a misunderstood fear which can lead to unnecessary killing. To give you a quick introduction to the bear species around the world, here in North America, we have the American black bear. This is the kind of bear that we have right here in Connecticut. They can be found throughout North America, throughout Alaska, Canada, the United States, and northern Mexico. The polar bear can be found here in North America and Asia, and I think parts of Europe along the Arctic Circle. The brown bear is the most widely spread out bear found in Asia, Europe, and North America. Here in the lower 48s, they're only in some of the northern states like Wyoming and Montana. And then they're found in Canada and Alaska. Over in Asia, we have the Asiatic black bear, sometimes called the moon bear. We have the sloth bear from Sri Lanka and India. The sun bear, found over in Southeast Asia, Malaysia. The giant panda from China. And over in South America, we have one bear. It's called the Andean Bear. It's found in the Northwest mountains on the south in South America. You may also see this bear with the title of spectacled like an old-fashioned glasses. And they changed the name of this bear. That's the familiar name, probably about 25 years ago now, maybe a little less, from the spectacle bear to the Andean bear. So if you do see the spectacle bear somewhere, it actually is the Andean bear. That's where they are. Now, these are the 8 existing species that we have today. Now, of all of these 8 existing species, all but 2 are listed as endangered or threatened. The American black bear there in the top left corner and the brown bear in the top right corner. Both of those have stable numbers, but all the rest of these bears throughout the world have very small numbers in the wild, and the numbers are decreasing, and they are endangered or threatened. Now, bears have been evolving for about 40 million years. About 20 million years ago, the dawn bear, or the true bear, from that bear, all of the bear species that we have today have evolved, some on different paths. So now in North America, during the last ice age, we had this bear, the giant short-faced bear. This guy was a giant. Now this display is from the Mammoth site in South Dakota. And you see the picture of the bear, the Arctodocimus, and you see a shadow of a man. The man represents a man of 6 feet tall. You can see Arctodocimus is 6 feet tall on all fours. That is about 40% larger than the largest bear that we have today. Now, Arctodocimus was a predator. They believe he was the largest living mammalian carnivore on the earth. And he disappeared about 12,000 years ago with many of the other megafauna as the climate changed and vegetation changed, prey changed. And of course, humans came on to North America and started changing things there too. Now here in Connecticut, prior to the 1600s, we had a thick, dense forest. About 95% of our landscape was forested, which supplied what is needed for our woodland wildlife, which is food, water, space, and shelter. Wildlife was abundant throughout the state. We had many species, including wolves, mountain lions, deer, elk, beaver, turkey, and of course, the American black bear. Now, in the early 1600s, European settlers started to come to Connecticut to set up setting up settlements. The first here were the Dutch traders around 1614, setting up semi-permanent settlements. A little later on, 1633-34, we had settlers previously from Massachusetts, European settlers coming down and setting up permanent settlements in Wethersfield and Windsor. Now, most of these Europeans were farmers, so that is how they made their living, and also they had a great need for our forest, for our wood. Wood was used to build everything from buildings, fences, ships, transportation. The average family burned about 12 cords of wood a year for heating and for cooking. We needed the core wood for the blast furnaces later on for the iron industry, the iron mining in Connecticut for the blast furnaces. And then we needed to clear and make fields for our crops and our livestock. Now, with the clearing of the land and the need for the wood, many of our native species started to disappear from Connecticut. Many species like the black bear and the mountain lion and the wolf were completely extirpated from the state. They had huge bounties on them, feeling that they posed a threat to humans. So there were big bounties on these type of animals. Many of the other species were also pushed out of the state for like beaver and turkey, hunting purposes, and of course the beaver for his pelt. Now in 1840, the last black bear in Connecticut was killed in Goshen. Late 1700s saw Connecticut at its agricultural peak. At this point, there was about 85% of our landscape was forested. Was agriculture and had been cleared of the forest. Into the 1800s, this also continued the use for woods, but then things started to change in the early to mid 1800s. With the opening of the Erie Canal in 1825, we now had a direct water route from the Atlantic coast out to the Great Lakes. And this changed a lot of things with the agriculture happening in this state. And a lot of the agriculture moved out of the state and moved out to the Midwest, where it was actually easier to farm. And once the farmers stopped working the land here, our forests started to grow back. Many places in Connecticut, as you're walking through thick woods, you see stone walls and foundations that are actually left from our agricultural heritage. These stone walls were not built going through the forest, but what they were is they were usually borders to fields, and the trees just grew up around them. And that's why we have all these incredibly beautiful stone walls going through our forest here in Connecticut. There were new changes for the state. Wood was no longer the primary source of fuel. In the early 1900s, the iron industry shut down. I believe by 1923, all of the mines were closed in Connecticut. We had conservation management of natural resources. In 1903, the state of Connecticut actually started forest management, making it the third country in this, the third state in the country that started practicing forest management. We brought about game management and environmental management. Today, the state has about 32 state forests, which are about 160,000 managed acres, which can also be used for our recreation. We have strict hunting and trapping regulations, and we have wildlife conservation. Today, Connecticut is actually about 55-60% forested, with mature forests of 100 years or older, which is pretty incredible considering how long we've been populated. Now, with the return of the forest, many of the native species began to return. Also with the hunting regulations, so some of the species were not overhunted. Now, some of the species came back on their own, and others were actually reintroduced by the State Wildlife Division. Turkeys were reintroduced to the state, along with other species like beaver and oh gosh, I can't remember the fishers, thank you. Others came back on their own, such as the white-tailed deer. Now, they estimated in 1900 that there were actually 12 white-tailed deer left in the state of Connecticut. So you can see that with the loss of the predators, such as the mountain lion and the wolf, the deer have made a huge comeback in the state. After about 100-year absence, young black bear were seen in the northwest corner of the state, mostly traveling through. In the 80s, these sightings began to increase. We started to see black bears around denning season, and we also started to see mothers with cubs. Now, this is a time in a bear cycle where they're generally not doing a lot of traveling, a lot of moving around. So that's how we knew that a permanent population was reestablishing in the state. Bear sightings have increased significantly in the state since the 1940s, where you might have seen one or two, and now there's the reported bear sightings are huge in the state. I'm thinking there were over 5,000, maybe 8,000 last year reported sightings. Here in Connecticut, even though we're very thickly populated with humans, we still have a lot of great bear habitat here in the state, or wildlife habitat. Where you see the dark green and even the light green, those are areas for our wildlife here in Connecticut to thrive, giving them what they need to survive. This is the website for the DEP, and this website has a lot of great information for the state about our state parks, our state forests, our wildlife, wildlife rehabbers, and it also has the information on bears there and the bear sightings. You can go to this website if you do see a bear and actually record the bear, where you saw it, if you saw any tags or collars or that type of thing. So it's a great website with a lot of information on it. Now, black bears require a forest of several tree classes with mature trees such as oaks or beech nuts to supply food, and of course an area of water, whether lake or stream, ponds. Now, here in Connecticut, about 99% of our black bears are actually black. Black bears come in many different colors, including light brown, dark brown, beige, tan, gray, blue-gray, and even white. Out in the British Columbia area, there's a subspecies of the black bear called the commodity bear, referred to as the spirit bear. This bear species, about 1 out of every 10 of the bears born are this white phase that you see here. Now, they're not albino. It's with what they call a white phase. So black bears come in many, many different colors. Here in Connecticut, the adult male usually weighs about 125 to 400 pounds. The adult female is about 90 pounds to 300, maybe a little bit more towards the winter. The largest bears ever handled in the state of Connecticut were about 600 pounds. There were 2 of them, both males. One was in Bloomfield, and I believe the other was in Heartland. And when I say handled, meaning that the State Wildlife Division had one of them, I believe, had to be removed. They were living under somebody's porch or something. So anyway, the largest black bear in the wild ever recorded was, I believe, from Nova Scotia at just over 900 pounds after being field dressed. So this is about twice the normal size of a black bear. So this guy was huge. Now, bears have good hearing and very good eyesight. Their hearing, they can hear a higher range and a lower range than humans. Their eyesight is very good. They actually have color vision like we do. But their sense of smell is one of the best of any land animal. We know that dogs have an incredible sense of smell. Well, they estimate that the bear can smell about 7 times better than a bloodhound. So you know that their sense of smell is incredible. Now, bears have an annual cycle that they go through yearly. Starting in probably about the mid-spring with what we call normal activity. This is when bears are starting to feed again. They're raising their cubs. They'll be mating a little later on. Now, and they really are doing a little bit of traveling, trying to get about 8,000 calories a day for themselves. Now, as the summer starts to come to a close and the fall starts to come in, they go into a hyperphagia state. This is what I call a pig out fest. It's like a Mardi Gras before they go into hibernation. They need to put on weight, a lot of weight. And they're going to be doing a lot of traveling during this time because they're going to be looking for food anywhere that they can get it. They want to put on or eat about 25,000 calories a day. And this is where the natural nuts come in to play for the wildlife, is those nuts have high fat content and it helps them get those calories they need. Now, as the fall comes on and we start going into what they call the fall transition, which is right about now, that's about where we are, the bears actually start slowing down. It's actually a metabolic change in their bodies. They start to slow down. They start looking for a place to den for the winter. They actually even stop eating. And then, of course, we go into hibernation, which is going to start happening probably about now into December, depending on usually pregnant females are the first that go into hibernation, and then the young subadults go into hibernation, and the males are usually the last to go. Now in the early spring, around mid-March, when they come out of hibernation, they go through what they call a walking hibernation. This is for about the first couple of weeks that they come out. And now not a whole lot has been going through their system at this point. So they need to get their system, their GI tract going again. So they're actually still probably losing a little bit of weight at this time. Now, bears were not considered true hibernators, even though we always hear the story about the bear going into his cave and hibernating. They weren't considered true hibernators. True hibernators, like the chipmunk or the ground squirrel, when they go into a hibernation state, they are pretty much frozen. Their heart rate and their body temperature drop significantly. But they actually need to get up, wake themselves up every 2 weeks or so to get some food that they've stored and to get a little bit of hydration and to pass any waste needed. Now, when bears go into hibernation, they can go into hibernation, depending on where they are in the country, for 2 to 7 months. During this time, they don't have to eat, drink, urinate, or defecate. They can stay in this sleep state for this entire time. Now, often they do on nice days in the middle of the winter, when we have those January thaw days, they will come out, possibly wake up and come out, see if there's any acorns left from the spring. So they don't always sleep all the way through their hibernation, but they can if they need to. Bears, and especially the young bears that haven't packed on enough fat for the winter, they will stay in this sleep state for the entire time because they need to conserve their energy. They can't waste any of their fat on even looking for food. Now, today, bears are considered actually highly efficient hibernators. When they go into their hibernation, their respiration and their heart rate drop, but their body temperature actually stays within about 12 degrees of their active rate. They have a very, very thick coat, which prevents heat loss. It keeps the cold air out and the body heat in, and this allows them to maintain this high body temperature, which is why they weren't considered true hibernators, because part of the checklist on hibernation is that their body temperature drops significantly. Now we know that hibernation is a mechanism to conserve energy during times of little or no food. And like I said, bears are extremely good at this. Now they've packed on a lot of their fat. So during the hibernation, they're living off their fat. They're burning about 4,000 calories a day. And this supplies them with hydration and nutrition. However, they're living off 100% fat, so their cholesterol level is actually twice as it is during their active rate. However, bears do not show any signs of heart disease, hardening of the arteries, cholesterol buildup. They produce something called a bile juice. It's actually created in the liver, but it's stored in the gallbladder. It's called ursodeoxycholic acid, and this actually breaks down the cholesterol, preventing the bears from getting cholesterol gallstones. And this actually has been synthesized using, I think, cow bile, and it has been used with humans also. This is also the substance that the bears are poached for around the world. This particular substance, and it's not, is big in traditional Asian medicine, and not necessarily for the cholesterol value, but for other things. And this is why bears, especially in Asia, are poached a lot. They also have a reduced kidney function. Their kidney function can go down to about 25%. Now, during this time, they actually recycle the urea, something that we couldn't do because it's toxic for us. And when they recycle the urea, it creates proteins and amino acids, and this helps maintain their muscles and their organ tissues during this time of inactivity. Now we know with humans, it doesn't take much more than a week or two of not being active for our muscles to start breaking down, and our organs to start breaking down. But like I said, bears, this does not happen to them because of their physiology. They also have a regulatory substance that helps maintain bone mass during this this time of inactivity. They actually reabsorb the calcium, and it's believed that their bone mass actually grows, becomes denser during this time of inactivity. Again, another thing that as humans worry about is losing bone mass as we get older and with inactivity. Now, these are incredible things that the bears do naturally. And it's things that are being studied and looked at by the medical community. And if there are things that we might be able to learn about, synthesize, or somehow copy in some way, it could help us with a lot of human issues, such as osteoporosis, kidney disease, organ transplants, you know, those people who are disabled. It helps with, can help with stroke victims, and of course, colon disease. Now, here in Connecticut, the bears generally hibernate from mid-November to about mid-March. again, depending on food availability and the weather and stuff. Now, during that time, they usually find what we call a den to hibernate in. Now, most of us think of den as the bear cave, where the bear, goes into the cave, such as what you're seeing here, these little crevices in the rocks. But dens can be many different things. Actually, here in the Northeast, bears like to use brush piles and slash piles and laurel thickets for their dens. They'll also use dugout dens, just piles of leaves and sticks. The bear that you see in the lower left-hand corner, this bear is basically out in the open. They're kind of leaning up against a fallen tree, but you can see that the snow is on top of them. So they are exposed. They may use hollow logs and trees. The bear in the upper left-hand corner, it was very interesting. And this particular bear, I want to say they were in Heartland. They were in the middle of a swamp. And what the bear did was when the swamp kind of dried up for the winter, she raked all the swamp grass up and made a big, huge pile between these trees that you see, kind of like a big bird's nest. And there she was, boom, on the top of that bird's nest. And that's where she hibernated. And that's where she gave birth to 4 cubs that winter. Now, when they come out of hibernation in the spring, they are extremely hungry. And this is another time they're going to start, they're starting to get their system working back. One of the first places that greens up in the area are the wetlands. And one of the things that comes up early in Connecticut wetlands are our skunk cabbage. And this is actually part of the early spring diet for many bears. It's a roughage that helps to, like I said, get their GI tract kind of working again, because it really hasn't been working much for the last couple of months while they were hibernating. Now, throughout the year, they love things like soft mass, which are berries and fruits, love insects, larvae, sometimes small mammals, carrion. In the fall, when they go for the hard mass, the beech nuts, the acorns, the hickory nuts, that's going to put that fat on. But they're very opportunistic, so they're going to eat just about anything that they can find to eat. And usually that's where problems with humans and bears come into play. Now, mating season for bears in Connecticut is usually about June and July. Now, this is usually the only time that you will see adult bears traveling together. Adult bears are usually a solitary animal. They don't travel in packs. Sometimes you do see younger adolescent bears traveling together a little bit, but adult bears usually are more solitary. But of course, they do come together during this mating season. And one interesting thing with or another interesting thing with the female black bears is they can mate during this time. And even if their eggs become fertilized, those eggs don't start developing yet. They go into a pause state and kind of just float there in the uterus. And this is called a delayed implantation. Now, these female bears, they have to put on weight during the summer months and the fall months, so that when they go into their hibernation, they have enough energy stored for their cubs. And if by November that they've stored enough fat on there, then at that point, the fertilized eggs attached to the uterine wall start developing, and after about 2 months of development, these cubs are born right smack in the middle of hibernation in about mid to late January. And that's why the mother bears have to have the energy for these cubs. If they don't, the cubs will not survive. Now, if the bear is very thin, and they say about 150, 175 or below, come winter, come denning season, a lot of times the fertilized eggs will just be reabsorbed into her system. So now when the cubs are born, they're completely helpless. They've really only been developing for about 2 months. There can be anywhere from 1 to 6 cubs in a litter. And of course, 2 to 3 is normal. They weigh about 12 ounces, which of course is even less than a pound. Their eyes are still closed, their ears are closed, they have no teeth, no sense of smell, very, very little fur, there's just light fuzzy fur. They are completely dependent on their mom and what their mom can supply for them. So now the cubs that you see here in the middle picture, these cubs are actually probably about 5 weeks old already. You can see that their eyes are open. So I don't have any photos of newborn cubs. So these bears are already been growing for about 5 weeks and are significantly larger than they would be at birth. Now, mom is awake during the birth. A lot of times people joke around that they get to sleep through it. No, mom is completely awake and attentive to her cubs during the birth of the cubs. She cleans them up afterwards, and then she kind of gathers them and then kind of curls around them, allowing them to nurse from her while she kind of goes back into her rest. She has to keep these guys warm because they're not going to be able to keep themselves warm, and they just nurse and go to sleep and nurse and go to sleep just like a regular baby. Now, bear milk is extremely high in fat content. It's anywhere between 25 to 40% fat content. So that's what these little guys are living off of during the rest of hibernation. And usually when they come out of hibernation in the spring, they could be up to about 5 to 7 pounds based on how many cubs there are and how much energy mom has to give them. Now, black bears will stay with their mothers for about 17 months. They live with mom throughout, they come out of hibernation that first spring. They stay with mom that whole first year. They'll den with her again the next fall and the next winter, and then they'll come out again from hibernation. Now they'll hang around mom for about a month or so, and then usually around May, they have what they call a family dispersal. This is when mom forces what is now what are now yearlings to go out and on their own. She's forcing them, it's time for them to go out, find their own territories, find their own way in the world. Because mating season is coming up. Now, she will not mate when she has cubs or yearlings with her. It's actually dangerous because the males that might be wanting to mate with her feel that they're a threat. So she needs to push the youngins away, so to speak, before mating season. And because of this and the fact that they stay with her for about 1.5 years, female black bears only mate every 2 years. Female black bears start mating, breeding around age 2 or 3. males around 4 or 5. And again, this is very dependent on where they are, the food availability, the mate availability, that type of thing. Females, like I said, mate breed every 2 years, and they can breed up into their 20s, up into their mid-20s. Now, of course, with the rising number of bears in the state, we've got a rising number of complaints. They're estimating now that the state of Connecticut has over 800 resident bears, which is fairly significant. When I started doing this program years ago, I said, "Oh, we have 50 bears in the state." So you can see it's grown quite a bit. We do have good bear habitat, and in many areas. But as the population grows, they're going to be going more into the areas that are human populated. So we are the 4th most densely populated human state in the country. So we have a lot of humans just crunched into a small area, but we still have a magnificent state with lots of wildlife and forests and beaches. It's just an incredible state. Now, the biggest problems with bears, of course, are bird feeders. Remember I said they're going to go for eating anything that they think they can eat. Even if it's not edible, they'll go for it. Bird feeders and human garbage are the #1 problems that get reported to the state. There are different management that the state uses for managing bears. Currently, there is no harvest season for bears in the state. There's no hunting of bears in the state. They do use something like a trap and removal, a relocation, or euthanasia. This is used very scarcely because #1, there's not a lot of places to move bears within the state. It's illegal for the Wildlife Division to remove a bear from this state and put it in one of our surrounding states. Like, we can't just go over the border to New York and say, "Here, have our bears." They have to relocate them within the state, and that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult to do that. Of course, it's also a very expensive type of management. They do use something called adverse conditioning. It's a way of hazing the bears. If a bear's causing an issue in a certain area, the state will go there, and generally they trap the bear and they haze it. They try to get it to associate a really bad experience with what they're doing. If they were knocking over somebody's beehive, they kind of put them in, they trap them in these cages, the large cages, and while they're in the cages, they, like I said, they haze them. They make loud noises, flash lights. Sometimes they use pepper spray and things. It's just a way of kind of training the bears that, oh, well, when I was doing that, getting this honey from this hive, last time I did that, I had a really bad experience. So it's a way of training. It's called adverse conditioning. And they do have some good luck with that. Of course, it's doing studies and research, understanding bears, what they do, where they are, how much they are, how they breed and reproduce, socialization, habitat protection, important for all wildlife, including us, and public education, like outreach programs, to try to get people to know bears a little bit better. So they realize that #1, they're not the cute, cuddly toy. #2, they're not the ferocious beast either. The state has been doing a research project since 2002, live trapping bears, anesthetizing them, collecting data like weights and measurements, that type of thing. They do something, they examine the teeth. Behind one of the canines there's something called a premolar. If they take that tooth out, there's a lab they can send it to. They send the tooth, the lab prepares the tooth, it slices it very thin, puts it on a slide with a little bit of stain, and it allows you to see what we call cementum annuli, which are like the growth rings in a tree. And that's what you're seeing here, the section of a tooth. This big one is a tooth that was taken from a female bear after she died. She died of natural causes at about age 27. And you can see the cementum annuli. Now, the areas where the lines are very close together, the dark blue lines are very close together, that's the years that she was nursing. So that's the years she had cubs. Now you can see, though, that didn't really seem to happen till about age 10. So this female bear actually didn't produce a successful litter till she was about age 10. After that, every other year, up until the time she was about 26, she produced a successful litter. So it tells you a little about that. They'll ear tag the bears, any of the bears that they trap. There's 2 tags, they're big plastic tags going one in each ear. Because they're plastic, they do break off. So you might see a bear with just one, and other bears with 2. It doesn't mean anything. It just means one broke off. The different colors of the tags don't mean anything. A lot of people think if it's a red tag, it's a dangerous bear. They just use a different tag color every year. Some years it's red, some years it's yellow, some years it's white, blue, etc. And then they have the numbers on them of how they were tagged, so that if somebody does cite them and reports it, then they get an idea of where this bear is and how it's traveled. They also have some study bears, and what this is are bears that they have collared during this research project. And these bears will be followed during a period of time in their life for several years. All of the bears that are collared are females. They used to use what they called radio telemetry collars. Now we use GPS collars. Gives us a lot more data and is also easier to track the bears. And we can watch the bears, and like I said, we could tell where they are, where they've traveled, and in different areas, that type of thing. Now, during the winter, they do what they call a winter den inspection. They will track these bears to where they're hibernating, these bears with the collars on them, and they go in and they anesthetize the bear while she's still in the den, and then they kind of bring her out, and they do that process again where they weigh her. These are usually done towards the end of winter, usually in early March. So they're going to weigh her again, examine, do measurements. They're going to check to see that she has cubs. If she has cubs, the Wildlife Division will chip the cubs and will record them. If it was recorded that the bear had cubs the year before, she should have the yearlings hibernating with her. So if she had 3 cubs the year before, she should have those 3 yearlings now hibernating with her. And this helps the Wildlife Division get an idea of cub survival through the first year. If it was recorded that she had 3 cubs, but there's only 2 hibernating with her, they assume that one of the cubs during the last year did not make it for whatever reason. And this gives them an idea of cub survival through the first year. And that's part of the calculation in the population increase in the state. Here in the state, we do have a very good first year cub survival rate, 75 to 85%. And we do have an increase of 10 to 15% per year for black bears. Now we conduct the study, like I said, so we can get a better idea of what we have, you know, the numbers, how the reproduction is, how their survival is, where are they, have a better understanding of what we have helps us to design better management programs. Understanding behavior helps us to understand, again, how bears will react in certain situations, so we can teach others how to survive or how to coexist with bears, and also how bears might behave during times of low natural food, that type of thing. Again, all giving us a better idea of management ideas. Now, black bears, believe it or not, they're actually a shy bear, even though I know a lot of you that have bears walking through your yard, you figure, well, that bear is not too shy. Inherently, though, they are shy. They'd rather have nothing to do with us. But of course, that drive for food outweighs all of that. So they're always going to go where they think they can get food. They're an intelligent creature. They're highly intelligent, and they're a very curious creature, which of course usually goes with high intelligence. They're wonderful tree climbers. They can climb a tree faster than we can run on the ground. And once they're in the tree, they're actually very comfortable and very agile. Some people look at bears as, oh, they're just kind of this big, clumsy, pigeon-toed, you know, heavy animal lumbering around. But actually, most of that you see is the fur. And they are very quick. They can run up to 30 miles an hour. And they're very agile. Take a look at their claws. These claws are meant for digging, for tearing apart logs to get at bugs, and for climbing. They're not the kind of claws that a true carnivore would have for holding prey. Bears really don't run down their prey and hold them. That's not most bears. That's really not the way they get their food, which is why most of them have a diet largely of vegetation. Now, in North America, since the year 1900, which of course has been 120 years, there have been 73 killings from black bears of humans in the wild. Statistically, that works out to about 1 out of every 1 million black bear in the wild will kill a human, compared to every 1 out of 17,000 humans will commit homicide in our societies. One thing you always hear is never get between a mother and her cubs. And this is true if you're in brown bear or grizzly bear country. Brown bear mothers are extremely protective of their cubs. Black bears have a different way of defending their cubs, where they evolved in an area with larger predators. They were actually the smaller predators. So the way they protected themselves was to run into the forest and climb a tree. And that's why the black bears are such great tree climbers. That is their #1 defense, because the other predators are too large to climb the trees after them. Of course, unless it's another bear. But so that's why they say, you know, if you're running away from a bear, don't climb a tree, because the bear is going to climb the tree faster than you can. And this is basically what bears are taught from a very young age, from cub age. Mom will teach them, when you feel fear, you go up the tree. And when they're young, generally young bears will stay around areas with these climbing trees so they can protect themselves. Now, if you're in an area with bears, whether you're living there or recreating there. You want to follow some good rules. The basic rule is don't attract the bears. Whatever could possibly attract the bears, and remember, whatever the bear thinks it might get for food should be removed or secured. If you're camping, always keep your campsites clean, dispose of your garbage properly. If you're in the backcountry, store your food properly in bear-safe containers, which they sell at many of the hiking type stores. Never keep anything in a tent that's going to attract the bears. And that's not only food and food wrappers, but also think about, okay, you had a campfire that night, you cooked your hamburgers or your fish, your steak, the smoke got on you, it's absorbed into your clothes, and you take your clothes off and now they're put to the side. Now that bear, all that bear smells is what you had for dinner on those clothes inside your tent. So they suggest that you don't even keep those clothes inside your tent with you. If you're hiking in the woods, travel in groups if possible. There is safety in numbers. There has never been a fatal bear attack on groups, on larger groups. Usually the fatal bear attacks that do happen on very rare occasions, the person is usually alone or there's two people. Stay alert and aware of what's around you. You don't want to surprise a bear or any other wildlife. You want to, if you're hiking in the woods, you want to make sure you know what's going on around you. If you hike with your dog, please keep the dog on a leash for the dog's safety. A dog's natural instinct is going to be to want to go after that bear. And a bear's natural instinct is going to be to want to protect itself. And a good swat for even a large dog from a bear with those powerful front arms could do a lot of injury to the dog. And of course, as humans that love our dogs, the human is then also going to run after the dog right into the bear, so then there's chance of injuries there. Carry a deterrent, things like pepper spray or even air horns. And with the pepper spray, just make sure whatever kind you have sprays in a stream at least 10 feet. And you could get those pretty much everywhere. And they don't have to be those humongous cans that you see, in Eastern Mountain Sports or something that are $50. It can be just the little ones that you buy at the gun stores. These are some of the safe, the bear resistant containers for food. If a bear is persistent, chances are it will get into this. And these containers are good. They're plastic, so they're resilient, but they also keep the smell in, not only from the bears, but from mice and bugs and stuff like that too. Look for bear signs. If you're out in the woods, you can look for bear scat or bear poop. You might see tracks in the snow or soft ground. Remember, bears have 5 toes like we do. Bite marks or scratch marks on a tree, or there might be some hair where a bear has rubbed up against a tree itching itself or something. With bear encounters, like I said, if surprised, bears could become very agitated. There's a bear behavior that a lot of people assume is aggressive behavior. And a lot of wildlife people also call this aggressive behavior. A bear will be confronted with a human and they start exhibiting behavior like They'll start making low groans and moans, clacking their teeth together, slapping at the ground, maybe even doing these little hopping up and down motions. Sometimes they'll do a small charge where the bear will, come forward, slapping the ground a couple of feet towards you. Most people assume this is an aggressive bear about to attack. But basically, this bear behavior is telling you that this bear is extremely frightened, is generally not wanting to attack at this point, just wants to increase its distance away from you or the human, whatever is frightening it. But like I said, too many times people feel that this bear is now aggressive and is going to be attacking you. And again, in any encounter, you want to increase your distance as quickly as you can. If you do see a bear, like I said, in the wild, keep your distance. Some people say, make noise, and generally the bear will, once it knows you're there, will go off in the other direction. If you want to watch it from a good solid, 50 meters, that's fine. Again, bears are not hunters. They're not going to come, they're not, for the most part, going to hunt down the human prey. But you still should keep an eye on the bear and try to increase your distance or get to safety. If there's a building nearby or a car nearby, it's better to be safe and get there. Now, you always hear never run from a bear. Well, if you need to get away from the bear, the only thing is however you leave that bear, for the most part, is not going to matter. If you turn your back on that bear and walk in the other direction quickly, that bear is not going to follow you. They always say, back up slowly, and those are, again, behaviors that are associated with actually no proven reasons. It's just behavior we've assumed all these years, and there's no proof that a bear is going to. I've known people that have run from bears forward, run from bears backwards, run by bears, and most of the time the bear is just running in the other direction. Now, there are the occasions, very rare occasions, when a bear does approach. And this is going to happen. Bears are intelligent creatures. So like humans, every bear is different. Now, you've heard the play dead. When a bear approaches you, this is, again, good if you're in brown bear or grizzly bear country. Where they evolved was in a more open area. They were the larger predators. So the way they defended themselves was to defend themselves. It wasn't to run and climb a tree. They needed to defend themselves. They would stand their ground. If a brown bear or grizzly bear is approaching you in a close way and you can't get to safety, the best thing to do, that's when you want to play dead. You want to get in a little ball on the ground, no sound, no movement. Try to cover the back of your neck and like I said, curl up in a little ball. Because the bear is looking at you as you are a threat to them. And generally when they feel you're not a threat, that's when they'll leave you alone. So, and of course, if you are going into big brown bear and grizzly territory, you probably want a little more training than that. So anyway, now on the other side of the coin, you have the black bear. Now, the black bear sometimes approaches humans. Most of the time, it's because they're young, adolescent, and stupid. And they're very curious. They will approach humans. Oh, what do you got? What is that you got in your hand? And I've seen this. It's happened to me. Most of the time, you could scare this bear off very easily, stomp the ground, just yell at it, tell it to get get lost. There have been situations recorded, and very, very, very rare situations, where a black bear will approach a human in a predatory manner. Yes, it's at this point it's looking at the human as prey, and this is usually in areas, back countries, or way up in the Canadian wilderness, where bears are not used to seeing humans. And that's where most of the fatal attacks have happened. Now, if a bear does approach you and it doesn't seem to go away, that's when you want to stand your ground and basically urge the bear to go away. You want to mimic dominant bear behavior, because you want to let this bear know, I'm not prey, I'm dominant. You want to keep direct eye contact with the bear. Stomp the ground. Use a low-pitched, assertive voice telling the bear to get lost. Make noise, hit the ground or a tree with a stick or rock. If you need to, throw the sticks, throw rocks. And hopefully, if you're in this situation, you have your pepper spray, which, aim for the nose and the eyes. And once that hits the bear, all it's going to be concerned about is its nose burning and its eyes burning, and it gives you the opportunity to get to safety. It doesn't actually aggravate the bear, which some people are afraid of. The bear is just concerned with the burning now and is no longer paying attention to you. And always provide a escape route for the bear, so that if the bear does want to run away, it can. This is another thing from Hollywood. Usually in the movies, right before a bear is about to attack, you see a bear go up on its hind legs and start waving its arms around and growling and stuff. But bears are not, that's not an attack pose for a bear. Bears usually come up on their hind legs like this. They're trying to get a better look at something or a better sniff of something. It's usually a very non-aggressive. I mean, if you look at this bear's face, there's no aggression. There's just curiosity in the bear. And of course, then there's the ever-loving, oh, I want to get a good scratch on this tree. Yep, that's good. Oh, okay, right there, right there. Yep. If you live in an area with bears, remember, two of the biggest problems: bird feeders and human garbage. Keep your garbage cans clean and try to keep them secure until garbage day. Don't put them out the night before. I know garbage men come or garbage people come very early, but if you put them out the night before, chances are you're going to have to be cleaning up garbage, and not just necessarily from bears. You can also use a little ammonia. Sometimes it cuts down the smell. If you compost, don't put things, fruits, vegetables, meats on the compost pile, because that's going to attract bears and other wildlife. If you can, clean and store any barbecue grills. Don't store any pet food or bird seed outside or in screened-in porches or sheds with very, very easy to get in doors. I've seen a bear be able to open a locked window without breaking it because of those little claws, so they can get into some areas. They ask you not to feed wildlife, bird feeders, keep them away. If you want to feed birds, do it only during the winter when most of the bears are in hibernation. And use electric fences around things like beehives or livestock, fruit trees, if you do have problems with bears in your area. And living with bears, it's possible. And like I said, hopefully if you learn a little bit about bears, you will understand a little bit more about them, why they do things, how they work a little bit, and it'll help you maybe be a little more tolerant of bears, maybe realize how much easier it is from our place to live bears. Like I said, whatever is going to attract a bear to your home, your campsite, whatever, either secure it or remove it. And that's going to get rid of a large majority of human and bear negative conflicts. So it's coexistence. It's possible. And like I said, it's a human responsibility. So remember, do not attract the bears, and, give a little bit more tolerance, a little more understanding, clean up our act a little bit, and that coexistence will probably be there. And that's the end of the presentation. I know I went over by quite a bit, which I apologize for.
Okay, just let me jump in. Kathy, can you talk at this point? Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Do you want, let me just mention, if you have questions, raise your hand or say something. Well, you can't, you'd have to unmute yourself. Many of you don't have videos, so I won't know if you have a question, but if you can type it into the chat window, I will call on you. I know I have a quick one.
Okay.
So we're surrounded by a lot of woods, and I always wonder, even if I'm going a short distance into them, can you tell a difference between a natural pile of leaves and a pile that maybe has someone resting under it? I always worry about just inadvertently stepping on, mama.
Yeah, well,
a telltale sign to the way it's created.
There really isn't. There really isn't. And now you saw one of the areas, there was a bear that was in a stick pile. You could actually see through the pile because she kind of climbed under there. And it's the same thing with the leaf pile. But there are situations that they've covered themselves enough, and you would know. So, chances are, like I said, if you walk by them and disturb them, they're gonna get up and run away. That's how they defend themselves. That's what their defense is going to be. It's not like they're all of a sudden, oh, you woke them up, and because they maintain that high body heat, they are able to move quickly with danger, but they're still in that groggy, lethargic state. Like I said, it's actually a metabolic change that they've gone through in the fall to get into the hibernation. And when they come out of hibernation and they're going through that walking hibernation, that's the metabolism starting to to build up to normal levels again too.
Okay, so we have a couple of other questions. Victoria would like to know if they have a regular travel routine that they follow every day.
Yes, it's very common that they will have that. And territories can be large or small. It all depends on what's in that territory. Is there food in that territory? Is there ample food? Is there ample, water in the territory? Are there mates in that territory? And like I said, during the time where it's just that normal activity where they're raising cubs and they'll be mating and stuff, they do have a routine. It may not be a daily routine, but you will be, if you go through the woods sometimes in an area where there's bears, you can actually see trails. And then of course, if you look on those trails, you see scat or that type of thing, knowing that the bear does travel that route.
Okay, there is another question from Dawn asking if bears will delay the denning, the hibernation, if the weather is very warm, as it has been.
Well, it's strange. And I've heard two schools of thought, and I think both are in play. Whereas the hibernation is actually a genetic type of thing, where like the bears in South Carolina and Florida genetically are gonna hibernate a lot less time, and chances are there's only going to be pregnant females that go through that short time of hibernation, whereas the bears in Maine, or up further in Canada, Alaska, they're going to be hibernating longer, and there is a genetic trigger that lets the bears know that it is time to go into hibernation. But if it's nice like it is now, that may delay it a little bit. But again, it also depends on the food availability. Earlier in the year, I saw a lot of acorns, but after that hurricane we have, I saw it took down a lot of acorns. I'm not sure what the natural food is. So when they get to the point where they're running out of natural food, they'll probably go into hibernation if they don't have a neighbor's trash can or something that they could use as supplemental food. And like I said, it also depends. Usually pregnant females are the first that go into denning. Then it's the younger adolescents, and then the mature males. So it's both factors. So it's a little genetic, but it's also the temperature and the food availability.
Okay, then another question. In areas not here in Connecticut, do the grizzly and the black bear coexist? Do bears have any predators besides man?
Basically themselves. In areas where probably Canada, Alaska, I want to say Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington. I think that's where the brown grizzly bears are in North America with the black bear. And they will be in the same area, but if it comes down to pecking order, generally the grizzly is going to have a higher pecking order. As far as if the two of them met on a trail, I don't really know. Chances are they would just go their separate ways. But that's actually something I would have to research a little bit. And I've probably read something about it at one point, but the mind doesn't retain everything these days. So, but I can check on that.
Okay, interesting. It would be quite a showdown, I would think.
Yeah, but usually the brown bears, the pecking order is in that place like Brook Falls in Alaska where they have all the salmon coming in. It's the mature adults get the best spot, and then it goes down the chain, and in the brown bears, and then the black bears also come to that area, and then there's a chain with them. But the black bears are never usually above the brown bears. So
then there is a question about someone who missed part of the presentation. What forms the bulk of a bear's diet?
Mostly vegetation. Almost all bears is vegetation, with the exception of the polar bear is probably the truest carnivore, basically because they live in the Arctic where there's no vegetation. So pretty much their diet is meat. Most other bears, it's strong vegetation. Some bears, like the giant panda, is all vegetation, or fruits, that type of thing. Coastal bears, like in Alaska, or Kamchatkas they have the opportunity to have animal protein from the fish or that type of thing. And if they come upon a kill, depending on whose kill it was, they may easily chase whoever it is off and take the kill for themselves.
Okay. Any hands up? Any other questions? I have a quick one, which is silly, but it sort of doesn't matter if the bear's in your yard like my guy was. But is there an easy way to tell the sex other than the size tends to differ?
Well,
from
there
looking
are,
at them?
there are, but it is hard. I mean,
You'd have to be up close and personal. Is that the idea?
a little bit? I mean, if you know, I know bear biologists who can tell.
But there's nothing.
Generally, a female is going to be smaller. Right. There are these hairs by the sexual organs that hang down in certain ways, but you have to be able to see at least that. Older males are going to have much wider heads, like their heads and neck are going to kind of be almost like the same size. So, and of course, anything huge, you know, like a 600-pound black bear, 99% of the time that's going to be a male. But there's nothing so much, you know, like the cardinal that you can see the difference.
So the muzzle doesn't vary. That's
no.
Okay.
Not that I've ever heard.
I'm looking for any other questions? Any hands up? Anybody who, let's see, there's one question here. Suet is often missing from my bird feeder. Can I suspect a bear? I am in bear territory.
Yes. You can suspect almost anything, though. A raccoon, squirrels even go after suet. Generally, if the bird feeder is still intact, a lot of times it wasn't a bear because they're not careful when they go after the suet. So if it's torn down, then chances are it was a bear. Otherwise, it could be, you know, almost anything out there, even a possum. So. And
a question for me: a bear will actually take the feeder sometimes and take it off, right? Take it away.
Yeah. Or really,
completely. We haven't found it. It's just gone.
Right. That's why I said the Wildlife Division suggests that you only put bird feeders out during the winter. And if you do want to feed them all year, my suggestion is that you put your bird feeder out in the morning, well after sunrise, and take it in well before sunset.
Right.
I mean, bears are not nocturnal, but like a lot of animals, they feed at dusk, dawn, and in the night, just because it's a safer time.
Yeah.
So. But you still may have to go chasing it through the woods.
We do that, but our bear comes in the middle of the day and, you know, all different times, but on quite a regular schedule. Anyway, any other questions? I'm talking too much. Any other questions? Anybody? I don't see any more questions, so I guess that's it. That was wonderful. Okay. Kathy, you want to take over?
Yes. Thanks a whole lot, Felicia. It was very informative.
And it is so much harder when you don't have a live audience. You know, sometimes I'm like thinking, oh, I'm just sitting here talking to myself. So,
we have a meeting that's a half an hour delayed already, so I think we should end it.
Yes. Right. Yeah, and I have to get back to work, so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will talk to you all later, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It was terrific.
Okay, stay safe, everyone.